Fred Berner. You produced the film Maestro about composer and conductor Leonard Bernstein. You actually began developing this back in 2008. What made you first interested in telling his life story?
That's a long time ago. Um, uh, I grew up in New York and I went to the Young People's concerts, and Lenny was always part of New York at a certain time, which was a pretty glorious moment in New York, which is the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and through the 70s. Um, my grandson once asked me about which stories that I like to tell, and I said that I like to tell the ones that I can stay interested in for a really long time. Um, so this, by necessity, required being interested in a really long time. Primarily, though, I had done a movie called Pollock with Ed Harris, which was sort of about a game-changing artist of the time who was one of the great introverts of our world. And the more I got to know about Lenny and sort of got the music inside of my soul, I started to realize that the guy sort of defied definition and description pretty much in every aspect of his life. And so the breadth of it seemed deeply theatrical. And I figured if we could embody, if a movie could embody that kind of voracious appetite and commitment to art and to passion and to love and ultimately to family and to his own callings and sirens, that was certainly a character worth exploring, and would essentially reflect the times, and maybe we could all learn something ourselves about how to live a creative life. So I mean, everybody on this panel is endeavors to do that, and to see what that ultimately what that looks like, what it means for the artists, what it means for their families, what it means for the world at large, what's the collateral damage, what's the upside, what's the downside. It's a journey that we like to take, and I'd like to, I think my work tries to get inside of it as best I can.
And over the course of developing this film, how did it eventually come Bradley Cooper's way?
It's a long, graceful passing of the baton. It's a really interesting process. Initially it was an idea that I had and got Martin Scorsese interested in. We then went out and found a screenwriter who we all thought was pretty terrific, named Josh Singer. And one of my fellow panelists, Elizabeth Raposo, was kind enough to put that into production at Paramount with all of us. Everybody did their thing. Marty went off and I think he was doing The Silence, and so his world became fairly occupied. Josh had just won an Oscar for Spotlight, so his world and docket got busy. We continued to do the research. We continued to just plow forward and know that our day would come. Ultimately, Marty sort of decided that he wanted to stay aboard as producer, but that Steven Spielberg might be a better match and for the material, doing West Side Story and being an aficionado of Leonard Bernstein. And I think that was somebody that Josh Singer had done The Post with Steven and introduced him to that particular to the draft that we were working on in the moment. And there was an idea on the table that Steven had, along with his producing partner, Christy McCosco-Krieger, that Bradley Cooper might make a really interesting choice for the lead. And little did we know that Bradley had, a hidden ambition to be a conductor, having weaned himself on all the conducting cartoons and Tom and Jerry cartoons and being just an insanely devout classical music fan and conducting aficionado. And they sent it off to Bradley, who came back and said he had just finished Star is Born, and said, I really love this entire idea, and if you decide not to direct it, I would love to throw my hat into the ring and dive into Leonard Bernstein. That's about 6 years ago. And the consensus was, after watching A Star is Born, was this guy's deeply talented and deeply immersive in the work that he does. And we would be fools not to embrace it. And at that point, that was when Bradley came on board. And the rest has been 5 or 6 years of intense wonderment and development and hard work.
And how did the project evolve over the years? Like, is the finished project a lot of what you envisioned, or did things change along the way?
That's a really good question, because thematically, it's pretty much exactly where it started. And dramatically and chronologically, it's somewhat different. And I think that, we knew we never wanted to make a cradle to grave biopic, just a classic biopic. And I think one of the crazy things about the smorgasbord and the omnivorous Leonard Bernstein is there's so much stuff out there. And so all the research, whether it was doing the Broadway stuff, whether it was doing the classical stuff, whether it was doing his peacemaking activities, whether it was going to Hollywood to score movies, and his personal life, which was varied and volatile. And I mean, the guy was an omnivore in the best possible sense. So, the palette was pretty big, and we could pretty much choose whatever we wanted. It was a little daunting over those years. And I think that the probably the first complete draft that we felt good about had a fairly fractured chronology. It definitely included Felicia, his wife, and the kids, but it was probably a more traditional approach, albeit adventurous, I think, and operatic and fun. Bradley's idea was to really refract the times and refract Lenny's creative essence through the prism of his relationship with Felicia, his wife. And in so doing, thematically, the basic touch points, which are the inability to be defined, and the appetites to keep making music, and refusal to be defined as one thing, all the things that rose to the surface absolutely rose to the surface consistently, regardless of where we started. In fact, one of the things Bradley and I have always said to one another is, it's a freaking miracle it's not anywhere as close to being the same movie that I had thought about 15 years ago, but in so many ways, it's truer to that form, and it's thematically very much the same. So it went through various incarnations, but it got really distilled down. I mean, it got distilled, and to the point where so many of the things that we were addressing, which is, the mores and folkways of the times, the politics of the time, the music of the time, the prejudices of the time, they're all there. We never really articulate them the way we may have been tempted to do in the beginning, but we ended up addressing them by virtue of their existence. So it's kind of the same movie, miraculously.
And you had support from the Bernstein family. What was it like working with them, getting input from them, and ultimately showing it to
them? It was great. I mean, I started conversations with them all those years ago. They were very patient with me. It took a really long time for us to, finally land something. Elements, scripts, the works, but they stayed on board. I mean, I love those guys. For some crazy reason, they trusted me, and then ultimately, I think there was a level of trust with Steven Spielberg as well, given West Side Story, and then I think that Bradley became Lenny, and I think that became apparent to them in the conversations that they had. So, and he involved them deeply at every stage. So we were given access to their house. We were given access to photos, videotapes, clothing, handwritten letters. I think they were ready. I think they were wanting, they knew eventually that a film would be made about their dad. And I think that they saw kindred souls in all of us in varying capacities. We're sort of the same age. We've all done the same personal work. We've all faced some of the same insecurities and demons and ghosts of our parents, and they were perfectly willing to take that ride. I think they then ultimately, I mean, we had one day where Bradley invited them down to his house to come look at some, we did these kind of proof of concept things over periods of years, and there was a lot of prosthetic work. So, you know, we were sitting with the kids, and there on this very large screen is their dad. I mean, it was strange and freaky and both exhilarating and emotional and disturbing and fun. And I mean, I just turned around to look at the guys, and I went and, you know, to Jamie and Alex and Nina, and I went, so you guys all right? And they said, we're better than all right. This is great. Let's, and Bradley just kept them so close, and they rewarded us with that ongoing trust. So it could not have been a better relationship.
Well, congratulations on the film, and thank you so much for talking with me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, it was a total pleasure. Happy to do it.